Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. My mother-in-law, a few years into her retirement, quietly tidied up her home. The house, occupied by just one person, didn't have much dust, but she always said, "As you get older, your hands just start moving on their own." Keeping things clean and organized brought her a sense of peace. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, and a small radio on the counter played an old classic. She was at an age where talking to herself was common. But on that particular day, the house felt especially empty. Then something strange started happening. My husband's mistress began visiting my mother-in-law's house frequently. At first, my mother-in-law thought she was just a kind neighbor. The woman would drop by with kimchi or side dishes, saying she was just in the neighborhood for groceries. But it wasn't a one-time thing. Soon, she was helping with heavier chores, like doing laundry or hanging out bedding. My mother-in-law felt incredibly grateful. When you live alone, even a loose doorknob can feel overwhelming. So, when someone regularly comes by to help out, you're bound to feel thankful, no matter who they are. I caught on quickly. I could see what kind of relationship the woman had with my husband, and why she was showing up at my mother-in-law's house. My blood boiled, but I knew better than to cause a scene. Tearing the family apart would be hard to recover from. I tried to talk to my husband about it, but he just brushed me off, saying it was a misunderstanding and not to worry about it. In that moment, I made up my mind. I realized that a screaming match wouldn't get me anywhere. The only thing that truly mattered were deeds and documents, the legal ownership of things. My mother-in-law had a secret she'd been keeping for a long time. She had quietly saved up money from her younger days and bought some land on the outskirts of the city. Now, there were whispers of development in that area. Over time, the neighborhood started to change. Rumors spread, public hearings were held, and signs went up. The final approval was just around the corner. I had known about this for a while, not from seeing the documents myself, but from bits and pieces of information. A comment from a relative, a quick look from a local real estate agent, and the way my mother-in-law would check the contents of her lockbox. All these small details painted a clear picture. Around that time, I started visiting a local real estate office. It was an old place with a worn-out sign, but it had a reputation for having the best information. I went there to ask about property values, legal procedures, and how to transfer the title, especially considering my mother-in-law's age. I knew that if I didn't act decisively, this opportunity would slip away. I chose a different path from direct confrontation. I decided to use paperwork, signatures, and careful persuasion instead of emotional arguments. I had seen before how documents could open doors that emotions could not. Meanwhile, the mistress believed the best way to get what she wanted was to win my mother-in-law's heart. When you get old, you long for a shoulder to lean on. Sharing a meal and fluffing up a blanket can open a door to someone's heart. The mistress knew this and exploited it. She'd bring fresh bread from the bakery, homemade ginger tea for a cold, and even offered to accompany her to doctor's appointments. My mother-in-law was a bit awkward at first, but soon, the sound of the doorbell brought her a sense of relief. Sitting across from each other, sharing a warm bowl of soup, she'd think to herself, life isn't so bad after all. In those moments, she wasn't alone. I was making steady progress with my plan. I carefully crafted arguments to convince my mother-in-law. I would talk about the convenience of sorting out her assets early, the complicated procedures if she were to get sick, and how having the documents in order would prevent future problems. People hear these kinds of arguments all the time, and they sound perfectly reasonable. I decided to use that logic to my advantage, with a plan to guide her toward signing the documents. My husband, meanwhile, was still looking the other way. After a long time of being exhausted from work, Relationships can just wear you out. When it becomes too tiring to figure out who's right, people often choose to ignore the problem. No matter what I or the mistress did, my husband couldn't take a side. In that void, our individual motives and actions became intertwined. One of us was preparing legal papers. The other was taking over household chores, and my mother-in-law's heart was caught in the middle. One afternoon, the mistress was walking home from the grocery store. When she happened to pass the real estate office, she noticed a familiar back through the glass door with neatly tied hair, the file folder in hand, and the way she nodded while talking to the agent. Something about it felt off. She stopped for a moment, then walked on. But a small thorn of suspicion was stuck in her mind. She had a feeling that something was happening, and that it involved my mother-in-law. That evening, when she visited my mother-in-law's house, she saw a memo on the dining table. The handwriting was neat, with a phone number and a company name. It was the name of the real estate office. Coincidences often lead to suspicion. The office she saw earlier and the note in her hand were connected. The mistress paused, then carefully put the note back where she found it. My mother-in-law was warming up water, oblivious. The mistress's heart fluttered. But this wasn't the good kind of excitement, it was the kind that sparks fear. I was preparing the next step. I planned to explain power of attorney and other legal terms in simple language. The summary I had written out had important sentences in large print. If my mother-in-law hesitated, I planned to say, "We don't have to do it now. Let's just get the papers ready for later." People often sign things not because they need to right now, but because they might need to someday. I knew this psychological trick well. The atmosphere in the house started to feel different. My mother-in-law was grateful for the mistress's help, while I was acting extra kind to push my plan forward. My husband just kept his head down and let time pass. In this strange space where kindness and calculation were indistinguishable, the old woman's heart was easily swayed. The small difference in whose doorbell rings each day, and whose hand turns the doorknob, changes the emotional temperature of the house. The mistress finally made up her mind. When coincidences add up, you have to get confirmation. The next day, she decided to visit the real estate office. She planned to pretend to be a casual customer, asking a few questions to get a feel for the place. She wanted to see if my mother-in-law's name came up, or if any documents related to me were on the desk. The mistress was driven by more than just curiosity. The warm meals and kind words from my mother-in-law had made her feel protective of the old woman. Even though their relationship started with someone else's pain, her desire to protect the old woman was genuine. At that very moment, I received a call from the real estate agent. The list of necessary documents was complete, and we had a rough schedule. We even had a few dates in mind to bring my mother-in-law in. I closed my notebook and took a deep breath. All that was left was to convince her. I reassured myself that with just a nod and a signature, everything would be settled. This self-assurance was mixed with a sharp sense of greed, and a strange feeling of relief. As the sun began to set, my mother-in-law looked up at the sky. While taking laundry off the line on the balcony, the clouds were thin, and a soft breeze touched her skin. The evening, as always, felt long, but tonight, she felt a little less lonely. When someone visits, even for a little while, the air in the house changes. She wondered who might come tomorrow, and whose hand would turn the doorknob. No one knew then that this small thought might decide the fate of the houses tomorrow. As the night deepened, different sounds echoed from different rooms. In one, the rustle of a document envelope; in another, the sound of a folding memo. In a quiet corner, an old radio played a song at a low volume. No one spoke loudly, but hands were already moving, ready to change tomorrow. The mistress thought of the first bus in the morning, while I, the daughter-in-law, repeated the key phrases that would make my mother-in-law nod. My husband still had his back turned, pretending to sleep, listening to nothing and everything at the same time. Tomorrow, the doorknob of this house will turn again. The only difference will be whose hand holds it, and which way the door opens. The person who crosses that threshold first would likely gain control of both the house's papers and its heart. Everyone was just beginning to realize that a small kindness, a single sentence, or a small seal could become a knife that slices through tomorrow. The next morning, the mistress steeled herself and opened the door to the real estate office. The doorknob rattled, and the bell rang a little too loudly. The old building had a musty smell. The agent looked surprised to see an unfamiliar face. The mistress tried to act casual, avoiding eye contact and asking about property prices. But her eyes were drawn to a document on the desk. On the white paper, her mother-in-law's name was clearly written. Her body froze, her neck stiffened, and her hands trembled. She pretended to continue the conversation, but her ears were focused on the paper. The agent must have noticed because he quickly covered the document. But it was too late. From that moment on, the mistress was certain that I was plotting something. On her way home, the mistress's mind raced. Why was that document there? Why had the daughter-in-law been visiting this office? The pieces of the puzzle started to fit together. The clear picture that emerged was that her mother-in-law's land was the target. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It had become a battle tangled up with money and property. Around the same time, I was trying to sway my mother-in-law. "Mother, it's a good idea to sort out your documents now. What if you get sick and there's no one to handle things?" I'd say, "Don't make it complicated. If I help you, we can get it done quickly." I used logic and a feigned sense of concern with every word. My mother-in-law shook her head at first. "Isn't it too early for that? I'm perfectly healthy." But my words had a strange power. The elderly are often vulnerable to a single emotion: anxiety. What if she falls? What if she ends up in the hospital? Everyone carries these worries. I was exploiting that vulnerability. I smiled gently. "We don't have to do it now. We can just get the seal registered and keep it safe. You can use it whenever you need to. It's so much easier than keeping your documents scattered. Just let me handle it, and you won't have to worry." My mother-in-law didn't respond. Her heart wavered. She kept thinking about the personal seal tucked away in her desk drawer. Meanwhile, the mistress felt a strange tension whenever she visited the house. When I spoke to my mother-in-law, the atmosphere felt different. It was as if we were both hiding our true intentions, with a sharp edge behind our smiles. Every time my mother-in-law's eyes flickered with doubt, the mistress felt more uneasy. One day, the mistress was doing the dishes after making dinner when I arrived. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment. It was a brief but intense exchange, a silent battle hidden behind polite greetings. I smiled outwardly and said, "You've been working so hard. Mother must feel so secure with you around." But my voice had a hint of sarcasm. The mistress felt it but didn't say anything. Instead, she just kept meticulously cleaning the house, choosing to let her actions speak for themselves. A few days later, the mistress decided she couldn't wait any longer. She finally made up her mind to tell my mother-in-law what she knew. After a long hesitation, she said cautiously, "Mother, I don't mean to pry. But has your daughter-in-law ever talked to you about your land?" My mother-in-law looked at her in surprise, then lowered her head. It was true that I had brought up her assets several times. She hadn't thought much of it, but the words were starting to feel heavy. The mistress continued, "I'm sorry if I misunderstood anything, but I saw your name on a document at the real estate office. It seemed like your daughter-in-law was doing something without your knowledge." My mother-in-law's face went pale. Her heart sank. The thought that someone was moving her property without her Consent was a nightmare. That night, my mother-in-law couldn't sleep. The ticking of the kitchen clock seemed unusually loud. All my words kept replaying in her mind. I'm just trying to make it easy for you. And, we're just getting things ready for later. At first, they had seemed reasonable, but now they sounded manipulative. With the mistress's revelation, her mind was in turmoil. On one side, there were my logical arguments on the other. The mistress's warning. The two voices clashed in my mother-in-law's head all night. The balance of power in the family was about to shift. And it was becoming clear which way it was heading. A few days later, I finally set a date to take my mother-in-law to the real estate office. I smiled gently as I told her to bring her personal seal and ID card. Despite her discomfort, my mother-in-law was persuaded by my words. You might need this later, and put the seal in her bag. That morning, the mistress dropped by, pretending it was a coincidence. She calmly brewed some tea and asked, Mother, do you have an appointment with your daughter-in-law today? My mother-in-law hesitated for a moment, then confided, yes. She said we should go to the real estate office to get the papers ready. The mistress nodded calmly, but her heart was pounding. Inside the real estate office, I was confident. I had already arranged everything with the agent. The moment the documents were signed, the land would be mine. My mother-in-law's hand trembled as she looked at the seal on the paper. Is this really okay? She whispered to herself. As she hesitated, I subtly urged her on. Mother, it's just to make things easier for you. If not now, when will you get it done? Then, the door burst open, and my husband and the mistress walked in. My face went stiff. My husband snatched the paper and shouted, What is this? Were you trying to steal my mother's land? The air in the office froze instantly. I was flustered, waving my hands. No, it's a misunderstanding. I was just trying to help Mother. But it was too late. The mistress spoke calmly. I've been watching for days. I saw her sneaking around here, preparing documents. I even saw the papers with your name on them. My mother-in-law's face turned ashen. All my previous words flashed through her mind. Just to make things easy for you. And, we're just getting things ready for later. All of them now sounded like empty excuses for greed. The seal she was holding fell to the floor and rolled away. My husband's voice trembled with anger. It was wrong of me to ignore you. But to try to steal my mother's land like this? This is it. We're done. I cried and begged. Honey, you don't understand. I was just trying to find a way for myself. But his eyes were cold. Everything fell apart quickly after that. I had to leave the house empty-handed. I lost the property I had coveted my whole life and my position as his wife. My husband ended up divorcing me. But the fact that he stayed with the mistress was just another seed of misfortune, not a new beginning. My mother-in-law felt a sense of relief that she had been saved from my greed. But she couldn't help but feel sorrow over her son's choice. In the end, it was my greed that was destroyed. The affair was just another thing that tore our family apart. All that was left was not money or love, but wounds. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story.